So we are going to make our first project in Blender, which is a mug. But before we do that, we need to set up Blender so that it's easier for 3D modeling for 3D printing. When you open up the application, you'll get the splash screen. You can just click off to the side and it will go away. The first thing you want to do is change the preferences. So go to Edit, Preferences, and you want to go to Input. And you want to make sure that Emulate Numpad and Emulate 3-button mouse are checked. I already have them checked because I was doing some work in here before, but you probably don't have them checked. And if you're using a laptop that doesn't have a 3-button mouse, you want to emulate that. And also if you're using a laptop, you probably don't have a numpad. And the numbers at the top will be helpful for changing the orientation of objects when you're trying to look at them. The next thing you need to do is go to Key Map. You need to change the spacebar action from play to search. So play is if we were doing animation, and you can come in here and can change it later on if you decide to do some animation, but we don't really need to do animation for 3D printing or 3D modeling for 3D printing. Okay, so once you've made those changes, you need to go here. It'll autosave, but you should actually press save right here to save the information. Then you can close that. All right, so next I want you to change some of the settings for the scene. So right here in the panel, you want to click here and you want to change the units for remodeling. Right now it's set to meters and you want to change it to millimeters. And you also want to change the scale to 0.001. You'll notice that everything got a little bit smaller. I'm going to click on the default cube here and press N, and it says that it is now 2 millimeters. Usually when you start up Blender, it's 2 meters, but we just now changed the scale. The next thing you want to do is change the viewport to go along with this new scale. So right here, the viewport options are basically how you're viewing the objects before they're rendered, if you were going to render them out. So we're going to change this to 0.001 as well. And we're also going to turn statistics on. Okay. Next thing I want to do is actually go down here to the status bar and turn on statistics and turn on memory so you can see how large your creation is in memory. Okay. Next, you want to change the view here. I'm going to go down to and change this to 0.1 and change this to, it's now 1000. We're going to add 2 more zeros. Okay. So when we zoom out, we can see the cube. Okay. Okay. Next, we're going to make some changes to our workspace. So we have actually a couple workspaces in the default view here. There's a timeline down here if we were going to do some animation, but like I said, we're not going to do any animation. Up here, we have the viewport, which you can see right here where this viewport is selected. Up here is the outliner, which is selected, which shows us all the objects in our scene. And down here are the properties. To give us some more real estate, we're actually going to get rid of the timeline. So you can create a new workspace by dragging from the corner and over. And I can make this workspace something else, like a file browser if I wanted to. So click here, go to file browser, and it's now a file browser. The way that I get rid of it is going here and then just dragging over, close that. So I want to get rid of this down here. So I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go here in the corner. And you want to drag straight down, okay? You'll see the cursor changed into this kind of arrow thing, okay? All right, so that gets rid of the timeline to give us a little bit more space to look at what we're doing. All right, so one thing I wanted to show you is that now that we changed this so that we have a 3-button emulation, it is a little bit easier to navigate around this space here. If you press the Alt key and then click with one finger on your trackpad, you can orbit around like this, okay? You, of course, can still use the widget up here to orbit around, but it's a little bit faster to just do it like this with the mouse. If you press the Alt and Control, you can zoom in and out. Of course, you can zoom in and out with 2 fingers as well, but with 2 fingers, it zooms in and out a lot faster, and you might want to have finer control. So you want to press Alt or the Option key, and Alt and Option key are the same key, and Control to zoom in and out a little bit slower. Finally, you of course can use this to pan left and right. Sometimes you just want to pan wherever you are, in which case you press the Option key or the Alt key and Shift and then click to pan. All right. So the final thing we're going to do is actually get rid of all this default stuff because we don't need a light source or a camera when we're doing modeling for 3D printing. So we're going to select all these things and we are going to delete them by pressing X. Finally, what you want to do is make sure that you save these settings so that next time you come in here, you don't have to set all this stuff up again. I'm going to close this tool by pressing N to collapse it and go to File, Defaults, Save Startup File. Now you won't have to reset the millimeters. You won't have to turn on the statistics millimeters, and the default cube won't be in the middle when you start up. All right, let's get into creating our mug. We're going to do a Shift-A to get the add menu, and we're going to add a cylinder. Zoom in a bit here on this cylinder. We have the tool settings for this cylinder. Now, if you turn on numpad emulation, you can press 7 to get a top view of this cylinder, and press Option and Shift to move it over a little bit so you can see it. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit as well. This is in millimeters now, so we want the depth of this to be 100 millimeters, and we're going to make the radius 42 millimeters, which means that it's a lot bigger now because it was at 2. So we have to zoom out so we can actually see it. We can scroll, or you can press Alt and Control and zoom in and out like this. Okay. All right. Finally, what I want to do is make the vertices, and I'll explain vertices in a minute. I'm going to change this to 22 so that after you zoom in here, Control and Alt, you can see that there's a flat face on this side and on this side, and we're going to extrude the handle from this side, and that's why we reduced to vertices. Finally, I'm going to orbit around this by pressing Alt and then just shifting a little bit. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. The next thing I want to do is make sure that the cap fill type is set to nothing. If you accidentally close this tool menu, you can start it up again by pressing F9 to make these changes. All right, I'm going to click off of it. And now we're going to start editing the object. So to edit the object, you need to actually go over to edit mode. Now you can go to edit mode by clicking on here and going down to edit mode. But the quickest way to go to actually do it is to just click on the object and press tab to get to edit mode. All right, so this is what I meant. This is I mean by vertices. Vertices are actual points. You can actually see, which is why I turn on statistics, how many vertices this has. This has 44 vertices and has 66 edges. This right here, this point would be a vertice, and this line would be an edge. So there are 66 edges in this shape that we've created so far. And the faces are the gray parts. Okay, triangles, 44 triangles, and there's one object. Okay, all right. What I want to do is actually look at the bottom again of this object. So I press 7 to get to the top, and then press 9 to do the opposite, which gets us to the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to press Alt and click to get here so I can actually see a little bit better, zoom out a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is start to add our bottom of our mug. So to do that, I'm going to select this vertice and double click, which will select all the vertices around this loop. And I'm going to press E to extrude. Now I can move this around if I wanted to, but I'm going to press escape. So now it has extruded, but it's extruded on top of the current vertices. So now I'm going to go up here and move the cursor over here and press S to scale. And I'm going to move this in. And you can see at the top of the screen, underneath the file menu, the scale. So I'm going to scale this down to 7.5, about 0.775. Okay, so and you get about there, you can press enter, and if you need to adjust, which I do, you can adjust after you press enter, after you finish clicking off. 0.75, 0.75, 0.75, 0.75. Okay, so that's the bottom of our mug so far. I'm going to orbit this around because I want to look at the bottom and I want to actually fill in that hole. And fill in that hole, we're going to go to the faces menu and we're going to go to grid fill, and that will fill in the hole. All right, now what I want to do is put a little bit of a bevel on the bottom of this coffee cup so it actually looks like a real coffee cup. I am going to go to edge select. So right now we're selecting vertices. Right here is how you select edges. I'm going to select edges. I'm going to select one of the edges here, and I'm going to select all of them by double clicking, and it selects all the edges around the loop. Next, I'm going to bevel by doing Control B. Okay, and the bevel settings are at the bottom instead of the top, like the scale. And I'm going to bevel this down to about 1.7. Don't worry if you don't get it exactly. You can also adjust it when you click. So I'm going to click this, and I'm a little bit off here, so I'm going to change this to 1.771. And I want 3 segments. Makes it look much more like a bevel at the bottom of a coffee cup. All right, I'm going to loop this back around, and I'm going to press 1 to get a front view. And I'm going to put some loop cuts in this to increase the geometry of our object so that we can manipulate it more. So to make loop cuts, you're going to do Control R, and then you can click, and specifically we want 9 equally spaced loop cuts in our geometry. So now we have more segments elements that we can actually manipulate, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is solidify this so it has more of a coffee mug shape. And to do that, we're going to use a modifier here in the properties. So over here, we're going to click modifier and click on modifiers, and under generate, we're going to go to solidify. We want this to be 3 millimeters. Can't really see the thickness yet because it's 0 millimeters, which is almost impossible to see. But if 3 millimeters, you can see some of the thickness there, okay? Now to apply this modifier, we have to go back over to object mode. So press tab, go to object mode, and then click on the modifier over here, and then click apply. So now it's solidified, and if you orbit around, you can see what it looks like in object mode, looking very much like a start of a mug with our little bevel at the bottom here. And we're going to go back into edit mode to make some more changes, actually extrude our handle. So we're going to press tab, go back over to edit mode, and we're going to press 7 to get the top. And as I mentioned before, we reduce the vertices so that we could get the edges flat here and here. But we're going to actually make the handle on our cup over here. So I'm going to click this face, and then I'm going to orbit around by pressing Alt so I can actually see. All right. And I was just using that as a reference point so I know which one I need to click on. I'm not going to click on this one. I'm going to click on this one, click off, click on this one and this one. And then down at the bottom, don't start at the bottom, actually one up, this one and this one. So we're going to actually pull this around to there. But we have to prepare these first before we do that, these faces. All right, so before I do that, I want to inset this a bit, okay? So I'm going to press I for inset, for the inset tool, and we're going to move this in a bit. Specifically, we're going to move it in like 1.4 millimeters. Inset a bit, the bit, so I'm going to say 1.4. Then what I want to do is actually make these a little bit smaller. I'm going to scale these down, but I make sure the pivot point isn't where it is right now, which is the median point. I want the pivot point to be individual origins so I can scale all of these at the same time. Now that we have these selected and I changed the pivot point to individual origins, I'm going to scale on Z to scale these down. And I want to scale this down to 0.261. You can see it at the top as I'm moving it. Okay, that's almost what I want. Down here, I'm going to actually make it exactly what I want. It's 0.261. Okay, all right. So now that we've done that, we are going to use the spin tool. So the spin tool, with these selected, the spin tool is down here. And the spin tool, you can push geometry out around a particular curve. Now this is the Z-axis, but what we want to do is actually spin it around the Y-axis. So we want to spin from here at the top all the way around. Now, the way the spin tool works, it spins around the cursor. So we have to move the cursor because the cursor is in the middle of our geometry right now. And where we want to put it is in the middle of these 2 points. Okay, so I'm going to move off of this, the spin tool, and move over to scroll up here and click on the cursor. And like I said, we want to put the cursor in the middle. Okay, and you can zoom in to make sure you actually have it in the middle. Zoom in some more and pan up a little bit and see that a little bit better, and zoom in some more. Okay, it's a little bit off, so I'm going to move it here. I can zoom out. Okay, all right, so now we can select these 2 faces again. Go back to select and click these 2, and then we're going to go back down to the spin tool, which is here, and we're going to orbit around so you can see. All right, now we're going to spin this out, and specifically, we're going to spin this out to 178. Try to get over. Let's see if I was a little bit off. So make sure this is exactly 178 degrees. Okay. All right. So once you made that adjustment and click off, you can see what the handle looks like so far. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, Control and Alt. All right. So when you get down here and you can see this gap that we've made, we need to close this gap. The way we're going to close this gap is by selecting these faces and then connecting it. So I'm going to orbit around so I can see the faces that a little bit better. Make sure face select is selected. I click on this face. I'm going to click on this face by pressing Shift and press X to delete the faces. And now we have a hole. You can see that there's a hole there, but I also need to delete the faces over here too. So I'm going to delete the face here and here, or select the face here and here. And now you can actually delete them as well by pressing X with faces. All right. What we want to do is go to Edge Select and select the edge, this new edge that we created. You can see if I orbit around, the edge is basically the entire two faces that I removed, okay? Now I press shift and I want to click this edge as well. All right, so now double click and we have both edges selected, the edge that's on the cup and the edge that's on the handle. And now we're going to go to our edge menu and we're going to bridge the edges. Thing is that it creates an extra edge here that we don't need. So we're going to click on this extra edge, double click to get the whole thing around the cup selected, or the handle selected. And we're going to press X. Now we're not going to delete the edge because that will delete some of the faces as well. What we're going to do is we're going to dissolve the edges and it'll get rid of that edge. Okay, great. So zoom out a little bit, see what we got. We're very close to finish now. I'm going to go back up here and go to select mode because we don't need to do any more spinning. And if you look inside, you'll see that there's no hole and we have the thickness that we want. Okay, next, what I want to do is actually add another modifier to make this look more like a cup. So we are going to do another modifier, and it's down here. It's going to be the Subsurface Modifer. I click on this. You can see now that it's smoothed it out a little bit. I'm going to actually change this to 3, make it even better. This is 3, better, okay? And I am going to jump over to object mode. And now if you right click or 2-finger click if you're on a trackpad to bring the object menu down here, you can click on shade smooth. Make it look nice. I go back over to edit mode, and then I'm going to click on cage on to wrap the vertices around the new geometry. Make that look a little bit nicer. Go back over to object mode by pressing tab, and now I'm going to apply the modifier, and we're pretty much done. One thing that you might want to do to make this look more like a coffee cup is change the MatCap. So right here in this menu, we are going to click on MatCap, and I'm going to select the ceramic light bulb. Now you can see that it looks very much like a coffee cup, or coffee mug rather. All right, and that's pretty much it. What you want to do is save this in your All Projects folder, save as, go over to All Projects, and then save it as Mug Blend. That's it for this project.